Hey everybody, it's Miss Shawna here. Welcome to session 4 of Body Meets Mind. Today we are going to be talking about something very important related to mental health. I'm going to give you a clue about what it is, okay? It's something we need to know about in order to cope with our mental health and to have good mental health. Can any of you guys guess what that is? Okay, the answer is feelings. I know you're going to be rolling your eyes thinking, oh boy, this is going to be really boring. But in order to cope with our mental health, the first thing we need to do is understand all of the different feelings that we can experience and how those feelings might affect our thinking or our behavior throughout the day. So the first thing that I want to tell you about is some facts about feelings, okay? So what we know about feelings is that feelings can change very quickly. So what that means is that in 1 minute, you might be feeling sad, down in the dumps, and a little hopeless, but a little bit of time could go by, and a few minutes later, you could be feeling quite happy, quite settled, and quite encouraged about the future. So feelings do change, and they can also change very quickly. And that's one of the reasons why when we're working with students about decisions they have to make in their life, we always encourage them to take some time and really think about the decisions that they're making and not to make decisions just based on how you feel in the moment. If we do that, we might end up making some bad decisions. The second thing about feelings is that feelings last for different amounts of time. So you might be really worried and nervous about something for several hours or a couple of days, and then at other times you might only worry or be nervous about something for a very short time. So there's no right or wrong in terms of how long you experience a certain feeling, okay? Another thing we know about feelings is that they vary in terms of their intensity, meaning that you could experience a lot of happiness or you could experience a little bit of happiness, or some days you might feel kind of happy, so-so, okay? So there's no right or wrong in terms of your feelings. The other thing to remember is that if you're having a bad day or you're feeling a little overwhelmed or anxious or down in the dumps, there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay not to be okay. We all have days where we don't feel so great, and the last thing we want to do is make you feel bad about feeling certain ways, okay? Sometimes you can't help the way that you feel. And so again, talking to a trusted adult, which we've covered in previous sessions, is really important for making sure that you end up feeling okay more days than not. The last thing that I'd like you to remember about feelings is that feelings often change depending on who you're spending time with, where you are, what you're doing, and the time of day. So the reason I'm saying this to you is that I want you to remember that feelings don't last forever. And so if you're finding yourself a little down in the dumps or overwhelmed, remember that by changing what you're doing, maybe the activity that you're doing or where you are, or simply letting some time go by, that will hopefully help you feel a little differently. Okay, feelings don't often last forever in a certain way, and so taking some time and changing what you're doing or where you are can be very, very helpful. The next activity that we are going to do today involves naming feelings. Feelings seem like there's something really easy to learn about, but actually it's really hard sometimes to identify how we feel and to identify how other people might be feeling. So I want to take a couple of minutes right now to list a variety of different feelings that we might experience or that we might notice in somebody else. And feel free to write these feelings down, to talk about them with somebody around you, or just listen and think about some of the things that we're talking about, okay? So my question is, what are some different feelings? Some different feelings might be happiness, joyful, excited, anxious, worried, nervous, petrified, fearful, mad, sad, gloomy, down in the dumps. Those are a variety of different feelings, and we know there's many more. But by being able to identify how you feel, that will help you in your journey of good mental health. Now that we've listed several different feelings that we can experience, what I'd like you to do is think about how you look or how you might be feeling inside when you're experiencing those feelings. So for example, if you're happy, how does that look on the outside? Are you smiling? Is your attitude upbeat? Are you speaking in a very positive manner? Are you talking more with people rather than keeping to yourself? What does happiness look like for you? Okay, the next thing I want to ask you about is sadness. When you're feeling sad and down in the dumps, how does that look? Does that look the same as happiness? It really doesn't, does it? You're not smiling as much, you might not be talking as much, you might be a little teary, your face might be red a little bit, you might just be keeping to yourself and feeling a little down. What about when you're angry? How do you look when you're angry? Do you look the same as when you're sad or when you're happy? Probably not. When you're angry, chances are you've got a red face, you might be using a really angry tone or mean words or a loud voice. You might take your fists and put them down on the table in a really hard manner. You might throw something. What does anger look like for you? When you think about other people who are angry, what do you see? Now we're going to talk about being anxious or experiencing anxiety, which means somebody who is really nervous, okay? So if you're nervous, what do you look like? Are you smiling? Probably not. Are you really angry? Well, you might be a little angry. Are you sad? Might be a little sad. But generally, when someone is nervous, they're very fearful. They have a hard time concentrating. They might be thinking very negatively. They might be thinking a situation is hopeless. They might be hesitant to try a certain activity or to show up for school or a test or a sports game. They might be fearing the worst is going to happen. They might be biting their fingernails, might have an upset stomach. They might feel that their heart is racing. They might feel that their hands are a little sweaty. So really what I want you to remember, guys, is that when we are experiencing a certain feeling, our body tends to show how we're feeling on the outside. Sometimes we can see that in other people, and sometimes we can't. The next thing we're going to do is talk about an activity or an event in our life that might make us feel a certain way. So let's start out with happiness. What in our life makes us feel happy? Do you guys have anything that you experience that makes you feel happy? I know I'm particularly happy when it's sunny out, when I get to play with my dog, when I get to be outside, when I get to spend time with my kids. If I am reading a really good book, that makes me feel happy. Is there anything in your life that makes you feel happy? I'm guessing you can think of some things. The next thing, let's talk about sadness. When you're feeling sad and down, we already know how that looks. What's something in your life that might make you feel a little bit sad or down in the dumps? Maybe it's getting a bad mark back on a test or an exam, losing a sports game, maybe not being able to spend time with your friends or your family, or having a change in plans happen that you didn't prepare for. That might make you feel sad. What about anger? What makes you feel really angry? Can you think of anything? I know I get really angry when my kids don't listen to me. So if I'm telling them to maybe wash their hands before eating a meal and they don't do it, that might make me feel a little bit angry. Or if they talk back to me, that makes me feel really angry. Or if I ask them to clean the room and they say they did it, but they didn't, oh man, don't like that. Don't like being lied to. That makes me feel really angry. Can you think of anything in your life that makes you feel angry? Okay, and the last feeling we're going to talk about is anxiety or worry. What makes you feel really anxious or worried? Is it writing a test? Is it going to a big game, a sports game? Maybe writing an exam? Maybe it's being away from your parents. Some kids don't like to leave home. Is it trying a new sport you haven't tried before? Or perhaps being alone in your house? There's lots of things that can make people anxious. So by understanding some of the different feelings that you have and what makes you feel a certain way, you will be able to better cope with your mental health. And that's why I wanted to take some time to talk about feelings, and we're going to continue to talk about feelings throughout the rest of this session. Now we're going to switch our focus away from feelings, and we're going to focus more on thoughts. So those are things that we think about in our mind. And what we know about our thoughts is that our thoughts are often a product of how we feel. So, for example, if I feel really confident about going into a test or an exam, my thought is going to be, I think I did great. I think I'm going to pass that course. I think I aced it. If I am feeling really happy about spending time with my best friend, I'm going to have a thought like, wow, I love spending time with my best friend. I can't wait to spend time with my friend again. If I'm feeling a little fearful about something, that means I'm scared about something, my thought might be, Oh, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail my test. I'm going to fail my exam. I'm going to fail the course. Oh, I'm such a failure. My parents are going to be so mad at me. Those are all different thoughts that somebody might have if they're feeling a little fearful. If somebody's feeling really angry about something, so let's say you had a fight with your friend and you're feeling really angry, some thoughts that you might have might be, I can't stand that friend, or they bug me so much, or I don't want to ever spend time with them again, or that wasn't fair. Those are all thoughts that people can have. Now, the reason I gave you those examples is because sometimes we can get in the habit of stinking thinking, okay? And what that means is that sometimes our thoughts become automatic and they can be problematic. So we start to think in really negative ways and in ways that are harmful to our mental health. And so I have a list of some unhealthy ways of thinking, and I'm going to go over that list with you and see if you can identify with or if any of the ways of thinking sound familiar to you. Okay, here are some different ways of thinking that can become problematic for people, and I wonder if you identify with any of these. So the first one I want to talk about is about negative thinking, okay? So people who think negatively tend to pay attention to the negative things that are happening in their life, or the negative things or things that have gone wrong in a particular situation or scenario. So these people tend to ignore the positive things and only focus on the negative things. If you can't identify with that, you might know some people who are like this because they're always complaining and they're always pointing out things that have gone wrong. Do you guys know anybody like that? The second type of problematic thinking is called blowing up or catastrophizing, okay? So these people inflate the negative things. They always see the extreme in things, such as, oh, I failed that test, that's it, my life is over, I'm gonna fail all of my courses this semester, my parents are gonna be mad at me, they're gonna take away my car, I'm never gonna do anything good in life, I'm not gonna get into college, all because a test or an exam was failed, okay? So their thinking becomes really, really negative and really, really big, and they make these really big general statements about life that aren't true, and they also use words like never, always, and everyone. So like everyone's gonna be mad at me, I'm always such a failure at school, or I always fail tests, or I never pass anything, or I never score in my games, when really those statements aren't true. But in the moment when someone's feeling a little angry, sad, or fearful, they tend to talk about things in that type of manner, using words like never and always and everyone. Okay, so that's people who blow things up or catastrophize and blow things out of proportion. Do you do that? Do you know anybody that does that? Another example of problematic thinking that is not good for our mental health is when we try to predict the future based on a past event. Okay, so we become like a fortune teller. So for example, if you struggled in a particular hockey game or basketball game, or if you failed a quiz, you might take that failure or take that challenge and then assume that it will always be that way in the future. Oh, well, I failed that test, so I might as well not take English in grade 11. I'm such a failure. It's just, I'm never gonna pass. Or if you took a few shots in a hockey game, you didn't score, your thinking might be, well, why bother? Why should I try again because I didn't do so well last time? Okay, so you take a previous event and you assume that the future will be just like that. Okay, and what we know is that the future doesn't always happen or come true based on past events. We can change our thinking, we can change our behavior, and that can change future situations and scenarios. Okay, there's 3 other types of thinking that I want to cover with you. Okay, guys? So the first one is perfectionist thinking. So this is a person who thinks they always have to have everything perfect all of the time, otherwise they're a failure or they're not going to do anything well. Okay? So these people set unrealistic expectations of themselves, and they use a lot of statements like, oh, I should have done that, or I could have done that, or I wish I did that better, or oh yeah, that was really great, but oh, look at that messy handwriting, or oh, I only got 2 goals, I should have got 3, or I should have got so many points in a certain basketball game, or oh, I only got 89% on a certain test or an exam, I should have got 95%. So a lot of unrealistic, perfectionist type of statements, and a lot of goals that are unrealistic. And what that does is put a lot of pressure on yourself to be a certain way. And again, nobody is perfect. Nobody has a perfect life or perfect grades or a perfect day. And so when we expect everything to be perfect, what we're going to do is actually let ourselves down and then feel like a failure. So perfectionist thinking is actually really problematic, and it's really bad for our mental health. The next type of problematic thinking I'm going to cover is the blamer. Okay, so this is where you always blame other people for things that go wrong. So, oh, it was because I had a bad teacher, or my coach didn't make it clear to me, or somebody has let you down and that nothing is your fault. Okay, that's what blamers do. They always blame the problem on someone else rather than saying, oh, I actually did that and I need to work on that area of my life to be better. Rather than do that, they just blame it all on other people. Do you blame other people for things that go wrong, or are you able to take some ownership and responsibility and accept some things that you've done wrong or that haven't gone well so you can work on them? The last type of problematic thinking that's not great for our mental health is, I call it the avoider. Okay, so these are people who avoid problems. They don't talk about problems. They kind of keep everything at the surface and don't talk about things that are significant. So they stay away from all sources of stress. They stay away from all sources of conflict and conversations that could be potentially upsetting. They stay away from people who might be potentially upsetting and scenarios that might not go well. So they just kind of keep people or situations at a distance. Okay, so they kind of keep to themselves a lot, and they don't have a lot of hard conversations. And that's not good for our mental health, because if we don't have hard conversations and we don't push ourselves to be in uncomfortable situations, we're not going to grow. We're not going to learn to be comfortable in different situations, and we're not going to learn how to overcome conflicts in life. So then when we're older and when we're in personal relationships, or if we're married, we're not going to know how to handle conflicts and how to communicate when things don't go well. Okay, so avoiding is not a good option either when we're struggling. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about some harmful ways of thinking that can really contribute to our mental health in a negative way, what I want to teach you guys are some strategies to use when you're finding yourself in those negative forms of thinking or negative reactions, okay? So if you're finding yourself, for example, putting a lot of pressure on yourself, and you are saying, everything needs to be better, you're not good enough, you have to be perfect, you have to score more, your grades have to be better. And if you're really getting stressed because of all of the pressure that you put on yourself, for example, there are some things that you can do to stop that. And I'm going to go over what some of those strategies are. Okay, the first strategy, that if you find yourself reacting in a negative way or experiencing some of those problematic ways of thinking, is to distract yourself. Stop what you're doing and do something else. Go and listen to some music, go for a walk, go play a video game. When you catch yourself in that harmful way of thinking, stop what you're doing and go on to something else. The second thing you can do is called thought stopping. So what I suggest you do is get an elastic band and put it around your wrist. And when you start to catastrophize, or when you start to think negatively and predict the future based on the past, what you can do is take an elastic band and snap it and say, stop thinking that way. That's something you can do to stop those harmful thoughts. A third strategy is to throw those thoughts away. So what you can do is write those thoughts down on a piece of paper. I'm not good enough, or I'm going to fail my course, I'm not going to graduate, my parents are going to hate me. All of those negative thoughts that you might have, write them down on a piece of paper, crumple up the paper, and throw it away. The other thing that you can do is visualize all of those negative thoughts in bubbles, and visualize yourself popping the different bubbles. Okay, we want to get rid of those thoughts and those harmful ways of thinking. Okay, the other thing that you can do is ask yourself, I call it the 10-10-10 rule. Ask yourself, is what I'm thinking going to matter in 10 hours, 10 days, or 10 years? And chances are the answer is going to be no. Okay, so just because you didn't score 3 goals in a game, or get so many points in a basketball game, or get a certain percentage on your test, is that going to matter in 10 hours? Probably not. You're probably not going to be as upset. What about in 10 days? Probably not. How about in 10 years? Definitely not going to matter. Okay, so 10, 10, and 10. Ask yourself if what you're thinking about will really matter at those intervals of time. The next thing that you can do is use positive self-talk to overcome those harmful ways of thinking, okay? So positive self-talk is what you can use when you're in a stressful situation to talk yourself through it and to feel more positive, okay? So I'll give you an example. If you, let's say, don't do so well on a math test, okay? Let's say you get 54%, and all of a sudden you're starting to have all of those thoughts about failing your math course, not graduating, not getting into university, having your parents take away your car, your parents disown you, and all of that thinking that can come with that negative reacting that we know is not true. What you can do is, again, take an elastic band, stop yourself from thinking like that, and try to challenge those thoughts with some positive statements, such as, well, I got 70% on my last math test, so I probably won't fail. Or, actually, I'm good at math, I just didn't study enough. Next time I'll study more. Or perhaps it's like, well, I didn't do so great on this math test. Next test, I'm going to be better prepared, I'll study more, and I can still get my course, and I can still get into college, even if my mark isn't what I think it should be. Okay, so challenge all of those negative thoughts and all of those harmful thoughts with things that are positive and true and more realistic about the situation. If you tend to predict the future and seem to know what other people are thinking, and you know it's going to happen in the future because of a past event. So if you're more of a mind reader, what I want you to do is to challenge your thinking on that and ask yourself, am I really a mind reader? Do I really know what people are thinking? Do I really know what's going to happen in the future? Actually, I don't. So I don't need to spend time and energy worrying about the days to come, okay? So you can challenge your thinking like that. The other thing that you can do is set more realistic goals, okay? So if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, I want you to think about the goals that you have for your life, whether it's in sports or at school or in your relationships, and ask yourself, is this a realistic goal? Do I really need to put all that pressure on myself? Is that pressure making myself and my life feel worse, or is it actually making my life better? So setting realistic goals is really important. Is it realistic that you get 99% or 100% in all of your classes? No, that's not realistic. That's going to involve a lot of time studying, feeling a lot of anxiety and pressure on yourself. And really, is that going to do any good? Not really. You're going to have good marks, but you're going to feel really, really stressed and anxious, and your mental health is not going to be good. So review your goals and make them a little more realistic so you have a more balanced life and so you feel better about yourself. Okay, guys, we've talked a little bit about feelings, we've talked a little bit about thoughts, and now we're going to talk a little bit about behaviors, okay? I'm going to try to keep this really simple for you. But you know how we covered all of those harmful ways of reacting and the harmful thoughts? So the negative thinking, the catastrophizing, the assuming the worst, predicting the future, being a perfectionist, all of those harmful ways of reacting can actually result in harmful ways of behaving. So we can therefore think negatively and think in a problematic way, and that results in problematic behavior. But if we can go back and change some of the thinking and kind of get rid of those harmful thoughts like negative thinking and perfectionism and catastrophizing, we actually will end up feeling better and our behaviors won't be as problematic. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you get a bad mark on a math test. Let's say you failed it actually, and then you were feeling really sad. Well, feeling really sad after getting a failed test is a perfectly normal, natural response. Most people would feel sad if they failed a test. But rather than get caught up in all of that negative thinking and putting too much pressure on yourself and feeling like a failure and assuming the worst and catastrophizing, what I want you to do is stop, give your wrist a snap, tell yourself to stop those harmful thoughts. Let's try to change our thinking. Let's tell ourselves, okay, failing that test isn't the end of the world. My parents still love me. I'm still a good friend. I'm still a good student. Next time I can study more and improve my grade. Just because I failed the one test doesn't mean I'm going to lose the whole course. I can still pass and things like that. You want to challenge yourself to think in a more positive and realistic manner. By doing that, you're going to change how you behave. If you don't do that, you're going to get stuck in all those harmful ways of thinking. You're going to become teary, you're going to cry, you're going to probably stay inside and not go around your family or friends. You might do something irrational like drop the course. You might cope in an unhealthy way and just be really, really sad and down and in the dumps. But if you change your way of thinking, chances are you won't be teary, you won't cry, you won't keep to yourself. You're going to do some things differently next time, like perhaps study more, review more, get a tutor, ask for some extra help, go to your teacher and talk to them about what went wrong so you can change it in the future. Okay, so the whole point is we don't want to get stuck in those harmful ways of thinking, because that ends up leading to harmful ways of acting. If we can change how we think, we will change how we behave, and that is always good for our mental health. Okay guys, so today we talked about feelings, we talked about thoughts and harmful thoughts that are not good for our mental health, and we talked about ways we can cope and behave in a more positive manner by changing some of those harmful thoughts. What I'd like you to do for this coming week is to pay attention to your thinking, and in your journal or on a piece of paper, or perhaps even out loud with a parent, make note if you tend to get wrapped up in harmful thinking. So if you find yourself being really negative, or being a perfectionist, or putting lots of pressure on yourself, or predicting the future based on maybe one little thing that went wrong, if you find yourself doing that, write down some of those thoughts on a piece of paper, or again, as I said, share them out loud with a parent, and try to think of things that you could believe or say to yourself that is more true and more accurate and more realistic to get rid of all of those harmful thoughts. Because what we know about harmful thoughts is that they're often not true and they're very unrealistic. So if you can replace those thoughts with something that's positive and true, chances are you will cope and behave in a more positive way, and that will have a huge positive impact on your mental health. So good luck this week, guys. I hope you've learned some things today about feelings and thinking, and about replacing those negative, harmful thoughts with something more positive, and I will connect with you next week.